Hi, everyone, and welcome to Panel Fest, brought to you by Craft Beer Professionals. A huge thank you before we get started to AbstraxHops and MarketMyBrewery for their support of this year's event. We all know that events can be challenging to come up with, to host, to make profitable. You get the picture. So large-scale events can often seem that much more daunting. Today, we are joined by some event experts that will share their insights and help you walk away with a solid foundation to make your best large-scale event decisions. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you on the panel. So if you don't mind, we're just going to take a moment to introduce ourselves, just your name, your company, and anything else that you want to add. Kevin, you're closest to me, so I'll start with you.
Okay. I'm Kevin McGee from Anderson Valley Brewing Company in Boonville, California. We're up in Northern California, about 2 hours north of San Francisco. We have a massive beer park, we call it. It's about 30 acres. We put it to good use, and happy to be here.
Heather, you want to jump in next?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Heather Kundert. I'm one of the partners and co-founders of On the Way Events here in Chicago, Illinois. We work with largely nonprofits to help put on their large-scale events, and what that might look like. That's a little bit more challenging and at a different level. I'm founded with the company with myself and two of my business partners who also have run several large-scale events throughout Chicago and large-scale beer events specifically.
And hi there, I'm Jennifer Breckner. I'm Director of Programs and Special Projects for the Strategic Initiatives Group at the Culinary Institute of America, and I'm based out of Napa, California. Strategic Initiatives Group puts on conferences and leadership summits for the culinary industry. And I just wanted to say for this audience, I also spent 7 years as events ambassador for Brooklyn Brewery, and then also was a communications consultant and writer for the North American Craft Maltsters Guild. And I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, we are thrilled to have all three of you joining us. I know that you all come from various backgrounds, bringing a lot of really diverse insights. So we're very, very excited. So the first thing that we kind of wanted to touch on is how you got into events, especially anything to do with beverages or, just kind of at that scale. So Kevin, we'll start with you again.
Yeah, I don't think we really had much of a choice. We've been doing events here pretty much since the mid-90s. The brewery was founded in '87, and it moved to its current location in the mid-90s. And like I said, it's got 30 acres. We have an 18-hole disc golf course, but we also have an outdoor stage and about a 10,000 square foot lawn. We're family and dog friendly and things. So it's just, the whole property just screams to have people on it. So we definitely do that. And the other thing is that when we first started kind of at the new brewery location, we started a large scale beer festival that I'll talk about too. But we just did the 25th one, and it's kind of a tradition, and we couldn't stop doing it if we tried. So.
Well, congratulations on 25. That is a huge milestone. So absolutely congratulations on that. And Heather, you want to give a little bit of your backstory?
Sure. So I actually I'm always the group planner for everyone. So in general, I've always done events. And then once I started in nonprofit, the executive director I worked with at the time said, "Hey, you have a beer event. Welcome to the team. You have a beer event in 3 months. Go." I didn't really know anything about craft beer too much at the time. Luckily, I knew how to do events and do the basics, but really kind of threw myself into learning. This was back in 2010. So things were kind of up on the up and coming here in Chicago. Really threw myself in learning a lot about the industry and just events and what that looks like. And as I did more and more, that particular event, which is still ongoing today as well, probably one of the longer running ones in Chicago, I started working with the Illinois Craft Brewers Guild here and helping with FOBAB and putting that event on, and kind of just evolved since then. And in actually 11 days, we have our biggest event of 3,000 people, also a 16-year event in about 11 days in Oak Park to benefit a charity here. So it's been kind of just a whirlwind where it just came naturally.
Amazing. And Jennifer?
Yeah, so I actually first got into events as an undergraduate art student. We had a student art association and was able to put on some big to me then events focused around censorship and art, and then just really liked being able to talk about different issues and to be mission focused through events. And so where I feel like I became a real professional was for over a decade. I worked in the Department of Architecture and Design at the Art Institute of Chicago. And so it's kind of wonderful. I just want to say to our other panelists, this is kind of like such a wonderful connection because I spent 12 years in Chicago, love that city, and then came to Northern California, and in part because I just really loved all of the wonderful things that go on with beer and food here. So it's a pleasure to be here, sort of bridging these two parts of my life. But I'll stop there and then just say, in the Department of Architecture and Design, I did everything from small private group events in architecturally significant buildings to large scale lectures of 1,000 and up. And then every 2 years did an event called the Modern Ball, which was a 400 person high level gala that raised over the course of my tenure, I think nearly $1.5 million for the Department of Architecture and Design. And so that's really where I became a professional, and the arts were really sort of my first career. And it was actually through the arts needing to have a second job where I met Brooklyn Brewery through a volunteer gig with Slow Food Chicago, and just really loved it and loved the industry.
It's quite the resume, and I think everyone on this call can absolutely understand needing a second job when you are primarily working with your passion. So you all have kind of touched on some of your bigger events, but I really wanted to highlight those. Just kind of let me know a little bit about what that event is. I guess it doesn't have to be your biggest, but probably your favorite in the big scale, and just tell us a little bit about it.
So the legendary Boonville Beer Fest is both our favorite and our biggest. It's been going on, we've had 25 of them, but we took a pause during COVID. It happens at the Mendocino County Fairgrounds because it's too big for the brewery property. So it's just down the street about half a mile or so. We generally get about 3,000-ish attendees, anywhere from 70 to 80 breweries, about 12 different food vendors, probably, 6 or 8, sort of merchandise vendors. And then I think that the really kind of interesting part about it is that it's really a weekend. The actual beer festival itself takes place on Saturday from like noon to 5, but there are people that show up on Thursday and leave on Tuesday. So there's camping that happens at the fairgrounds, and from our perspective, we take care of the brewers, and we have what we call the brewers camp here at the property. And in years past, we've had as many as maybe 1,500 people camping on the property, and we've cut that back in recent years for sanity reasons. But we'll have maybe 600 or so people come in, and part of it is that as a kind of a thank you for coming and pouring the beer at the brewery, we basically put people up camping, and then we have a dinner for everybody. And so we do like a big, cookout and stuff. And so it has turned into this really interesting beer community where people over the last couple of decades have gone there to network for jobs, to learn about yeast strains, to do, all this other kinds of stuff. And everybody brings something that they want people to taste. And so you kind of get a chance of, tasting some stuff and learning what other people are doing and where they're going with it. And so it's really much more than just kind of a beer festival. It has turned into, even for people that are attendees, there are people that use it as like college reunions. People come in from all over the world and just sort of convene there, and it's a tradition. And we get the Humboldt State Marching Band reunites every year is the Firkin Tappers. And so we have a marching band that walks into closed rooms playing at full volume and things like that. So it's an interesting and spectacular kind of thing. There's themes every year also, so people dress up. We get live music, so we get a chance to support a lot of local music and do that. And then the whole thing is a fundraiser for local charities. So all of the proceeds for it go to charities that are probably within about 20 miles of here. And in the last 25 years, we've raised almost $1.8 million. And it's been quite a ride. It's an interesting logistical challenge, but it's super rewarding. It's for a good cause. It's with good people. So that's our big one and our favorite one.
That's wonderful.
I think the camping makes me sound exhausted. Adding that extra layer on.
Trying to host any of that sounds exhausting.
Oh yeah. No, and there's people, I mean, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, there's people wandering around.
I mean, that really sounds exhausting. Yeah.
Well, then also I have to be like the responsible adult through most of the stuff too.
Yeah, right.
I'm too introverted to host that many people.
Yeah, you have to be the adult in the room.
I do think that that Kevin, you bring up this good point, which is this idea of community, both for the attendees, but also for the people working. And that was something I think early on, I'm not going to remember the name of it, but Sierra Nevada organized some sort of traveling beer festival, and they came to Chicago. And our Brooklyn Brewery team was there. And I still to this day remember how they really cared for us as being part of that. And people came around and just thanked us and also would like relieve us. We were always lucky with Brooklyn because we would go to these beer festivals and we'd have at least one other person with us so that we didn't have to just be there, sometimes it's like 2 sessions, be there all day by ourselves. But Sierra Nevada was really, their staff was really concerned about that and just saying like, hey, we'll jump in for you. Why don't you go around and taste some things? And I think, even though I don't work in beer anymore, it's that sense of community and really taking care of each other that I really are, like, I will say this a million times, our Chicago Brooklyn Brewery team was amazing and they took care of us. And I think that's a really important part, that when you're thinking about any kind of event, but especially large scale events where your team is really out there working hard, you have to take care of them too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, I mean, as you mentioned that, one of the things that I've observed and we've kind of seen is we try not to do, we do a lot of events and we try not to do events that don't have a good reason and don't involve like good people or either for a good cause or like that kind of thing. And one of the things that we've kind of noticed that it's subtle but obvious when you actually look for it is that when you do those kinds of events, and that's kind of the basis and the impetus for people being there, the behavior of the people who are involved is a lot more elevated. It's kinder. It's people still have fun, and it's kind of like goofy, and they can be creative, but it's friendly, and there's a different level than like if you have sort of a warehouse beer tasting, like a cover charge, and you're just going to try and drink your money back. And like that kind of thing, you have a very different environment and a very different culture in the interactions between the people, and it's resulted in us not having to deal with some of the behavioral issues that can come up when you have lots of people and lots of alcohol.
Yeah, we were actually just talking about that in a meeting with the village that we're working with on this, and even not only that sense of purpose, but I think just beer events have evolved from that. Like, just give me your highest ABV event, a beer, and putting a glass in front of us. They've evolved to people actually wanting to be, maybe it's just that we've all grown up a little bit more responsible adults at these events and things like that. It's a little less of the chaos I maybe saw in 2011, 2012, and it's just a nicer event. But that sense of community that you talk about, both Kevin and Jennifer, is just, I think, you see these music festivals that do it for 3 or 4 days, right? Lollapalooza was just here, and there's always a mess. Don't get me wrong. Like there's always gonna be things, but I think that there is this different sense of community amongst those. And if you're creating that, even I think you'll see the industry probably do more of those types of things as well, with the industry having more of those like weekend type things, because it's successful and people like it and they're around. So I think that's something that others should maybe model and look at.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You raise a good point too. I mean, back in, like when beer festivals all of a sudden became like a thing, a lot of the people who were producing the beer festivals were just people that realized that if they could get a venue and a license, they could have all these breweries show up and they didn't have to pay for any of the beer, and they kept the gate. And so that's why you ended up with a lot of these, they're like early beer festivals were just like, let's drink. I mean, that was the reason to go there. And that seems to have kind of, worked its way through the system. Breweries got tired of donating beer for other people's, kind of project. And it's not a model that people want to go to. And it's not a model that breweries want to participate in. And I think that may be part of the evolution too.
Yeah. We've definitely seen that change. Most of the events I'm involved in now are for either we're working directly with the nonprofit or they beyond the part of the proceeds, right? Because that can be 2 cents of every ticket sales if they don't identify or what that part of the proceeds means. But I think those for-profit beer events are becoming a little bit different if they're not having that different conversation.
And I think too, I want to acknowledge all of the groups who continue to bring those messages forward about safety, about inclusion, and that we, of course, in all of our organizations still have a lot of work to do. But I think, yeah, I mean, when I sort of naively, I remember going into my first beer festival, and when I first got hired, like I said, I was still working at the museum, and then was working in a part-time capacity for Brooklyn. And Andrew Maxon, our the first salesperson I worked with, he said, okay, so we got to talk about beer festivals. And I said, oh, I'm so excited to work. And he's like, no. He's like, no, I'm going to try to keep us out of those. And I was so naive because I had not really been to a beer festival before, and did some of those large scale ones where, I think the technical term is shit show, where by the end you have people just, really too drunk out of their mind and just going around and what's your highest ABV, and we were having some of our more smaller batch beers that we were sharing there. And it just became, hopefully that era is gone and we're moving more towards, I just, for the second year in a row, went to Firestone Walker's Invitational. And I think those kind of events, to me, where you're getting meaning, and it's what, everyone's sort of saying here, is these, rather than just how much can you drink, it's the taking that sense of community, but also this opportunity to educate yourself. They have some panels, they have sensory opportunities, and then you get to have beer from around the world. And so it's not that I think people don't, there's always going to be those people that really rage, but I think there is really an audience for this sort of context, the larger context, right? And the learning and the enjoyment of the culture of beer.
Absolutely. Very, very well said. And you all touched on some great points that I actually planned on bringing up later about the community and about some of the considerations with the diversity, the inclusion, the people that like to rage. I like the way that you put that, Jennifer. But I do want to make sure that we highlight kind of the bigger events that you, Heather, and you, Jennifer, bring. So let's go ahead and go back to that real fast. And then I definitely want to get more into some of the things that you all brought up, because I think those are fabulously important points. So Heather, we'll jump back to you real fast.
Yeah, sure. I have 2 loves in my life in terms of events that I've done. The one that's coming up in 11 days, I started out as a volunteer And then I was the volunteer that got responsibility. And then I was the volunteer that got this. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, I should be being paid for this. And so that's where I'm at now with this.
That's how they get you.
That's how they get you. And it's a great event. It's in downtown Oak Park, and we take over the street, and the businesses are really welcoming because, we're closing down their street. It's still open to the public. We don't close the street in the same way, but it's about 3,000 people, also about 60 breweries and 10 food vendors. And I just like it because downtown Oak Park is quaint. And then it's a zero waste fest. So we really work on every restaurant that's there. All the items are compostable. Everybody that's the restaurants know that, the brewers know that. We ask them not to, if they brought cans, we're working with a great recycler and composting company this year to make sure that that's the case. So we really try to bring the mission of the nonprofit forward and really talk about that mission. I'm a very mission-driven person, having worked in nonprofit now more than half of my career. And what is that mission and why are you there and what are you doing? My very, very first love, though, was my first beer event that I kind of touched on at the very beginning, where I didn't really know that much about craft beer. I'm from South Dakota originally. It took a long time to come to South Dakota to get craft beer there, and in a way before I even moved, I think. And when I started that beer event, it was about 200 people. And I just learned in 2010, I was like, I worked for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation pretty specifically. And I was like, we are sitting on money here that we're missing out on because we're not embracing this community. And it'll be something I think we talk about too. Like, I really, really worked very hard to gain the trust of the breweries that I worked with, the community, and making sure that it wasn't just that. One, because we were a nonprofit and there's a different set of liabilities and how we think about things, but making sure that I understood the industry and what we were doing and who I was working with and how we were going to make it special. I think our event, people still talk about it and wish that we kind of had it in the same capacity, because it was almost like a cocktail reception. People came dressed up after work. They came in suit jackets and dresses. And so it had just a different flavor all the way around. So we never really got, don't get me wrong, there was always there's always that crowd that's like, just give me all the beer. But because it was a little bit for this very specific nonprofit, and I was an event promoter that said, here, we'll give you part of the proceeds, I really was the nonprofit in face of that. And we brought that mission in. But I just love it too, because it is what brought me into the industry. It was a smaller event, only about we got up to 800 people at one point in time. And we did food and beer pairings and really learned what that was. But I love it, and we still talk about it, and people still go, and it still exists. So the two of those I've been working on them both since 2010 and 2013, and they're the reason I still work on those two events and not a lot of other ones, because you want to pick and choose what your first loves are. But those are two of my favorites.
Absolutely. And that's such valuable advice, that you really do want to pick and choose both the ones that you're working or volunteering for, and then, to Kevin's point, the ones that you as a business or brewery specifically choose to do. So love to hear that. Jennifer?
Yeah, and I would agree with that, Amanda, that I think there's also now, especially since the pandemic and the rise of virtual events, there's so many events. There are so many events that you could go to online or in person, that I think that's something that companies should be thinking about too. And, and I think, Kevin, you said this earlier, like, you really want to think about why you're having this event. Wow. And because you're competing with everyone, and but so I will say that an event that probably the largest event that I work on at the Culinary Institute is called Worlds of Flavor. And it's one of the country's most influential professional forums on world cuisines and food cultures and flavor trends. We have probably about 600 people come to our CIA at Copia, and it's a lot of cooking demos. It is sensory education, panel discussions, and presentations. And it's been going on. This will be the 25th anniversary of Worlds of Flavor, and my second. And it's just really this high energy, fun, educational, really delicious opportunity for food service operators to learn about world cuisines. And so we have a really small but great team who has, I'm often surprised at the things that we can accomplish with such a small team. But we have people who've been doing this for a long time. Our operations team is really great. And the one thing that I really love about working with a strategic initiatives group is just how much they really, it's the things that we're talking about here, how much they really are thinking about the tiniest detail, right? And so being able to do everything from, like, we have a marketplace that we do each day. So we'll have, sometimes upwards of 10 of our presenters who are putting out like 150 to 200 tastes each. And we have a Heston kitchen in our building where it's just like, it's really the vibe, right? Like, I don't ever really get to spend time in there because I'm out hosting and doing all of this, but we've managed to make this an event that is a conference and a festival, but also really celebrates our chefs and our presenters. And so, we take care of them, right? Like, we're not asking them to foot the bill for anything. We make sure, and I think, Heather, you mentioned this idea of building trust. And I think that's something I personally am very interested in, but also I think our team at the CIA does, which is we build trust with our presenters, we build trust with our audience. We have some people who have been to most iterations of this conference, right? And so I think, like, as a program director, the ways that I build trust is to really understand what our presenters, what their work is. It's my art history background that I research. And then, we have ideas because we have themes every year. So last year it was Worlds of Flavor, Africa and the World. This year is Authenticity, Flavor and the Future. And we have ideas. I work with our strategic initiatives and industry leadership director, Rupa Bhattacharya, who came up with this theme this year. And we work together with people where we have ideas and we have a theme and we're crafting this content, but we also want people to come up and to be able to show up as their authentic selves. And so that, I feel, is really my job to do that. And then I think, and I'll sort of end here, but I think in building trust with the audience, there is sort of three things for me when I'm putting together a schedule and thinking about our attendees and what they want. And so it's what they really kind of need in the industry, the things they need to learn, the people they need to see. It's inspiring them, but it is also thinking about what they don't know that they need. So sometimes it's there's part of it that is pushing forward, bringing in presenters across F&B who are maybe on their way up and people don't know them, as well as, like high level, people have cooking shows and things like that. And I think too, as we're sort of responding to the times that we live in, we increasingly also feel it very important that we include this context, right? That we talk about, when we did Africa and the World, it was to say, it's not only European traditions that are the most important, but also to understand where we are since the pandemic, and to be able to have chefs and presenters of color who can come and feel that they can present their authentic selves. And that's our job to sort of, promote that. But I think also we've been really pleasantly surprised that the audiences that we've had over the years are really also responding to this, right? So sometimes the conversations are challenging, but I think people are ready for that. And that's really our job, is to make those connections between our presenters and our audience, and help everyone feel comfortable so that we can have these conversations.
I love all of those points. Couldn't have said it better myself. And actually, that segues really nicely into my next question, which is that all three of you have mentioned kind of picking and choosing events and kind of the considerations that need to go into those. So while you all have sort of touched on them, I kind of want to bring that back and ask the direct question. What are some of your considerations, or the main considerations, when you're deciding, is this event worth hosting, worth volunteering for, whatever, and what considerations also should other people, other breweries or event experts think about whenever they're deciding, is this event, let's face it, worth it?
And just for clarification, worth it to put on, or worth it to participate in, or all of the above?
All of the above. I mean, you all have made really great points of, you have to find it worth it while you're putting it on, so that your consumers and your event goers find it worth it to go to. A lot of Jennifer's great points, they don't often know, consumer wise, what they don't know, but they sure know what they want. So it's kind of finding that balance and making sure that you all are putting on something that you're proud of, while also making it something that either you or another patron would want to go to.
I'll go first. We have a couple different things. So we have the property here where we kind of think of ourselves as a venue for the most part. We actually only produce a handful of events during the course of the year. One of them is the Boonville Beer Fest, and there's maybe two others during the year that we do ourselves. Other than that, what we're doing is we're providing a venue for other folks, and that comes with its own selection criteria. And we kind of focus on three things. It's that, are we doing something fun with good people for a good reason or a good cause? And all three of those things are important. And taking a look, and if you have questions about any one of them, you probably should pass. One of the real dangers that we have here is what I've started to refer to as permissions creep, where if you're not dealing with sort of professional or sophisticated event production people, you can get people that, like I discovered a few years ago, someone wanted to do a disc golf tournament, and we're like, yeah, okay, we can do a disc golf. And then we found online that they were promoting it as like a 3 or 4 day camping music festival. And I'm like, no, it's not.
Oh, no.
And it's stuff like that, that, is solved by knowing who you're working with. And also kind of having a good sense of what you're good at and what you want to do, and what you're not good at, what you don't want to do. Like we decline to do lots of things. We generally say yes to any 501 that wants to do, anything at the property. We make it available. The Humane Society is a regular thing. Home brewers, groups. We're hosting a fundraiser. The locals are putting together like a skate park. And so, we're hosting a fundraiser there, and we're hosting a circus, and things like that. And it's, some of it is because, the circus people, first of all, the circus people are awesome. Flint Creek Circus, if you ever get a chance, go see them. And it's great for the community, and it's, just kind of a fun thing also. And that's just, fun and good stuff. But they basically come in and do everything. We're not doing rigging. We're not doing, whatever it's like. So we have people that call up and they want to do some sort of like wedding type events, and I have to tell them, it's like, look, we basically have a field. If you want, if you want to bring a caterer and a tent and like that kind of thing, we can talk. But I don't have, I'm not in a place where I'm going to give you catering services and facilities and stuff and things like that. It's like, what are you going to do for bathrooms? I mean, that's a question you need to answer, not I need to answer, type of thing. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And so selection criteria at the beginning solves a lot of headaches. And then in terms of participating, we actually declined to participate in quite a lot of things. For some of the reasons that we talked about before. I mean, sometimes it's, kind of a beer festival that is really just providing access to alcohol and not really much else. That said, we participate in nearly every charitable, event or fundraiser or anything that comes and asks us for help or anything. And so we can, if you're a 501, we can provide beer legally. And so we do. And, we can do auction packages and things like that. But it's kind of the same selection criteria, but it's not at our place. It's still, are they doing something, is it good people for a good reason? And each one is just, on each, thing. We generally do not do events based on economic expectations. I've never once greenlighted an event because I thought it would make us money. Typically, if you do an event and you're the venue and you have the tap room and that kind of thing, you're going to end up being, able to sell a lot of beer, which is your business anyway. We do very little stuff that involves charging a cover. And part of that is just because we as the brewery, and it may be unique to us, are really more interested in just kind of sharing, who we are, where we are, and, having people use the property, because I think it was underused for a lot of years, particularly during COVID, among other things. But we also, since COVID, it gave us the opportunity to kind of recast what we're doing. And we had the best year ever at the tap room last year, and we did it by de-emphasizing alcohol. We took all the bar stools out of the tap room. We told everybody to go outside. We don't charge a cover. We don't require people to, 2 beer minimum or anything like that. We have music every Friday and Sunday, basically, and it's all free. And we installed a local artist, installed some fairy doors and a bunch of tree stumps. So you can bring your kids, then go hunt for fairy doors while you drink a beer. We're very dog friendly and all that kind of stuff. It's really more about kind of being a good neighbor and building a community, and also giving people a good reason to come and visit us, because it is an effort to get out to us, and we want to make it worth people's while. And we don't want it to be like, 2 drink minimum if you just spent, a certain amount of time getting here. Oh, we may have lost Amanda.
We may have lost Amanda.
I was talking too long. So.
Well, maybe while we're waiting for her to come back, I'm like, I can talk too, because I know we're still live. So talk a little bit about, Kevin, to your point, like who do you pick and who do you pick as, I personally, I look at it from a lot of different perspectives. So as an event producer, how to what events do I take on and choose to produce, which is a consideration. As a volunteer, what kind of events do I take on? I used to be the executive director of a nonprofit. So some of that is we would have organizations come to us and say, we want to use your name. It was for a very, very large nonprofit here in Chicago. And looking at that from that perspective of if they were saying, so I look at all those types of things. And I think you touched on it at one point in time. Who are you working with? What is that why, which you'll hear me say that a lot. And then do I know the producer of the event? Do I know the brewery that's putting it on? And do I trust the work that they're doing? And on the flip side, like you said, when you looked online and saw that Disc Golf was doing something different, have I looked into who they are and like seen either their messaging, the social medias, that it's all going to come back to you at some point in time. What is your messaging? What does that look like? Do I think that they've seen different things? And I have been an executive director who honestly has turned down sponsorships and partnerships based on the fact that the individual on the other end just wasn't a trustworthy source. And, telling that to board members that you've turned down sponsorship dollars is just never that's never a fun conversation. But the same thing happens when you're producing an event, or if one shows up. Like even now we have, if we have someone that comes to us and they come with an idea and they have no idea what an event takes to do that, like, well, we're going to charge you a little bit extra because we're going to need to coach you, because you don't know what it means to say like, hey, you need to order toilets. Hey, do you have security and EMS on site? Do you even know those things exist? So like when we're looking to take on an event as a producer, we're really trying to figure out who the person is that is putting it on, and do they understand what an event means, or are they getting at that bottom dollar and they're just like, oh, we're going to throw a beer fest and it's going to make us a ton of money. Mm-hmm. Maybe not. If you can't get the sponsorship dollars or the ticket sales, and if it's not a trusted thing, you're not going to get those ticket sales. So, we're in a very fortunate position, myself and my two business partners, that people know us and trust us, and breweries still show up to our events when we ask. And sometimes they only come to events because we're the ones asking, and they know we're the ones doing the logistics and making sure that it's okay. So that's kind of when I look at it I have 3 different hats that I look at when I'm deciding whether or not to participate in an event or volunteer an event or produce an event. They're just really, but it comes down to what we said before, either that trust or who do you know is doing that event, and is it for a good cause, for a good reason, and is it going to be worthwhile? Because I could volunteer or use my expertise at any one of 20 events on any single weekend in the city of Chicago. But really, I want to work with the people I trust and I've known for a long time who are doing this, that I know are in it for the right reasons.
No, I absolutely love that. And I am so appreciative of the fact that all 3 of you keep bringing up community and trust and really doing things for the right reasons. I think that's so important, especially as, Jennifer mentioned, there are so many events. And like Heather, you just mentioned, like you could throw a stone and hit 50 events. So it really is making sure that yours is the one that shines and for the right reasons. So I love that. And Jennifer?
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, I'm going to speak to the volunteering aspect or participating. And I also come from a nonprofit background. And so I just think volunteering with nonprofit organizations you get much more benefits out of it, I think, than the nonprofit in the end, because you get to meet people, you get to feel good about helping out with a cause. And I would say, just having been a long-time volunteer, I used it at one point to build up my resume, and that's been very helpful. And then I got to a point where I said, okay, I have enough experience where I'm working for free. So now things really need to be that I believe that I can make a difference doing this. And so, as I had mentioned, I've been a volunteer with Slow Food for over a decade. And I started off on a chapter, Slow Food Chicago, which was so much work. And now I'm more helping chapters be able to do events. And I was able to sort of cycle up through and be an international counselor. And it was just a wonderful experience. And I continue, to help in any way that I can. So I advocate for that. It's always just a good way to meet people and to do some interesting things. And I think also, too, if you are a person who is struggling in your career, or you want to do something, but you don't have the experience yet, that's one way you can do it. You just want to make sure that you still understand your own value in that. But in terms of my work at the CIA, I would say I am a passionate person, and I really start off with, like, how does it make me feel? Do I get that spark, right? And then have learned, and especially in this job, become more comfortable with like advocating for my ideas. And sometimes it's that I know that I have a good idea, but I'm dealing with people who who maybe don't think it's great, but how do I convince them, right? And so one of the things that I've wanted to do is have more beer programming, because I think, we're in Napa, so of course there's so much wine programming. We often do cocktail things, but not as much beer. And so volunteering for Slow Food years and years ago, met Dr. J Jackson Beckham, who lots of you know from the BA, but also from Crafted for All. And she came and did some events for our Slow Food Nations program that was in Denver. And I got to talking to her, and we shared, we were drinking some wild ales and talking about how much we love that style. And so that stuck in my head. And I thought, one day I'm going to have this program with her. I don't know what it will look like. And so I had the opportunity for, I led a program called Flavor Summit, which brought high-level F&B people to, it was more of a smaller, like 75 people, for 3 days of learning. And I thought, we have opportunities to do sensory education. This is what we're going to do. And I was super excited about it. She was super excited about it. And we put the program together where we sampled out 4 different American wild ales. And she just knows everything about everything. And so I knew she would she's such a great speaker. And so was able to talk to the sensory aspects of it, but also like the culture of beer and cool ships and all of that. And I have to say that I had a little bit of a panic attack before we had it, because I was like, are these people, like, what does someone who's an F&B in a cruise ship, like, did I totally not understand this audience, right? And it was a great, great event. She, of course, was fabulous, but I was really pleasantly surprised that the people in the audience, this wasn't something they really knew about, but they're F&B people. They're curious about flavors. And we were able to taste things out, and they asked really amazing questions. And we do surveys after each of our conferences and summits. And it came back, she was the winner of the survey, right? Like, so many, just like Dr. J was great. Like, I didn't know anything about wild ales and now I do. And then she was in contact with someone who said, I think I might try to incorporate this into our menu. So I think my takeaway from that is really, even if you have an idea and you think it's going to be great, and especially when you don't see a lot of people doing this kind of thing, you have to figure out how to get people on board with you, to get excited about it, right? Because it's a little bit of a tricky place to be in, to be like, I swear this is going to be really great. And so you have to really come up with, the case for it. And so, and that's how I've just sort of approached being a program director at the Culinary Institute.
I love that approach, and everyone's making so many good points. I feel like we could talk for hours about this. I feel like I and everyone watching could learn so much. But I do want to make sure, since we are coming up on time here soon, that we kind of talk about some of the key takeaways of, for people that are maybe trying to get into larger scale events, either from a nonprofit or from a food and beverage standpoint, or maybe some things that you've learned that you wish that you had known before you got into it, and anything that you want to add. Kevin?
Oh, wow.
I know, not to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. I'd say, because a lot of what we do are, we do a bunch of recurring events and things. I'd say that the first, kind of real actionable takeaway would be to be very discriminating with your selection criteria of the people or organizations that you work with. If you are going to be putting on an event, or you're going to try and get a bunch of breweries together to do like a beer festival, start really early recruiting the right breweries, and have a reason for what breweries. Like, maybe you want to do something that, has got a specific style of beer, or it's a regional thing or something else, and make sure that, what you're doing has got more reasons behind it than just, like I said before, access to alcohol. If really it's just kind of like an access to alcohol is the primary reason to go, then you're competing with every bar, in the area, and it's not there. I mean, we keep talking about community because that's really the main reason to go to a lot of these things. In particular, our main event, the Beer Fest that we put on, is really all about community, and beer is a component of that. But it's not really the reason to go. And for a lot of other things too, you need to have something other than, like, I keep repeating it, but you need to have something other than access to alcohol, as something that is going to motivate people to kind of want to do it. And so figuring out what that is early, and being able to communicate it to the people you're recruiting to be part of it, is super key. And I guess the other kind of tangible tactical takeaway is that once you do the event, make sure you circle up with your team and have like an after event, put your heads together and ask, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what was a surprise, and what can we do better? And then take all those notes and make sure that everybody gets them together. And you'll learn a lot about your event, but probably more importantly, you'll learn a lot about your own people. And you'll be able to start identifying people that really have a talent and really have some insight and a valuable perspective on these kind of events. And you can really develop those people and kind of elevate them and be able to get them more of that work. And you not only improve the events, but you also help somebody with their own career development. And that's as good a reason as any to do all of this stuff.
Absolutely.
Oh, Heather, you're muted.
Had some traffic in the background. You kind of stole my actionable item, but that is true. I really focus. I'm going to give some very tangible things too. I think some people forget about little details with events, but I think that's why always, what is it? If you focus back to what is the goal and purpose of this event, you're going to hit your note. So like the one we're doing next Saturday is a fundraiser for an organization that builds sustainable communities. Let's keep that in mind. Let's talk about the compostable part of it. Let's talk about the why. Let's remind brewers that it is for a nonprofit and they like it. Let's remind the volunteers that it's that way. But really go back to that focusing on the goal, the purpose, and the why of this event, and making sure that you keep that as your main focus when you're doing a little bit of everything. So that includes, and this is where I go back to your brewer selection. Let's make sure when you do talk to the brewers, one of the very tangible things, and this is what I said when my business partners and I, people come back to our events either as volunteers or brewers or participants, we give them all of the details. I have a fact sheet that tells them what time the event starts, what time it ends, how do they find the restroom, what do they need to wear, what if a guest asks them where to go in a case of emergency. They have this fact sheet that has every possible question and answer I can think of that I give them. And I make sure I've done that for every one of my events. I've run 6,000 person events and that are much more detailed than some of the bigger events I run. And I still give the same fact sheet to those team leads. So making sure that they have that, really answer every question for them, whether or not that's their role the day of, someone's going to ask them the question, where do I just do this? So giving them that very tangible piece of it. I also make sure that sense of community, again, take care of their volunteers and brewers. Feed them, tell them where they should go. I'm a huge believer in handwritten thank you notes. And I cannot tell you how many times I hear from people oh my gosh, I never get a handwritten thank you note anymore. So we write handwritten thank you notes to our brewers and restaurants that participate or the vendors that are participating. So those are some really tangible things to think about. But do you have snacks and water? And those aren't helping you put on your event for large scale, which we can talk about that. And we've touched on, do you have the right EMS? Do you have the right brewers? Do you have tents? Do you have an emergency plan? All of those things. But what are some of the little details that people are going to keep coming back? And I think those are some of the things, and even for guests, if there's signage, just to tell them which direction to go to find a particular brewery or, whatever it might be, or a style or whatever you're doing. Just make sure you're thinking about what's the goal and purpose, who are you serving, and what are the little details along the way that's going to make the day comfortable for them. Great points.
And I'll just jump in here and say, Heather, your fact sheet, you are a person after my own heart. Because what I always say about event production is it's not a mysterious thing, right? There's a lot of talent to being a good event producer and a lot of intelligence. But really, what it comes down to is you have to be the person who cares about the tiny details. And there's so many of them, right? And so I remember at a nonprofit that I volunteered for, I was the events chair, and then I was promoted to a VP, right? And so the woman who was the president had said to me, well, I want you doing more strategizing and less being involved in events. And you do them so well, and then other board members, feel intimidated. So can you put together a how-to? And I said, are you sure? And I was working at the Art Institute at the time. And I was like, are you sure you want to see this? Right. So I put it together. It was like 4 pages. I really tried to be like upbeat and whatever. And not to say that event producing is not upbeat, but she was just like, she just said no. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, this is going to scare people away. And I said, this is not me, anything that I'm doing, right? Like, this is how it goes. Is that successful events are ones where you can have a holistic sort of overview of what's going on, but you are really in the details, like thinking about when people go to the bathroom, thinking about pathways, thinking about, like Heather said, an emergency plan. And so there's just no getting around that. And you have to really have your people who are on board with that. And you are communicating that. And I love, Heather, that you said, you know, how do you take care of your people? Because I work beer festivals where you were like, do we get fed? Are we allowed to go to the bathroom?
Oh, we
once
speak
had
people.
yeah, and it's just
I feel like
that
that's a
kind
good
of
life
thing.
rule.
Yeah, and also to just say thank you, you know, like that I think is one of the things that I learned in nonprofits is like, you might not have money to pay people, you know, they're volunteering, you know, but you can say thank you and you can acknowledge their work. And that's really important. And I think that's really, I will stop there, but that's really my sort of takeaways. If you want your event to be successful, you have, you know, and I will say this, while you are that person or the people who take care of all the tiny details, you also have to be super chill, because you can do everything right and something will go wrong. And you can't, if you are the person who's managing all of this, you can't let your energy level, you know, you can't freak out and then affect your whole team. You have to be in control, and you just have to expect it, right? It's something, if it's like an emergency, and you know, but like a lot of the things that happen are like, you know, the toilet stopped up, and then you're like, okay, so let's plan B it, and hopefully you've thought through these kinds of things. And you know, and also to have fun while you're doing it.
Yeah. I'm often told, you're so calm. I'm like, well, what are you supposed to do? Like, you fix the problem and you move on. I mean, there's not a lot else you can do about it, but be calm and fix it. Yeah.
Yeah. If I melt down, would it help?
Yeah. No.
Especially at a 3,000 person festival, like you don't want to have mass chaos, because if they see the host freaking out, everyone else is going to. It's like the flight attendant rule when you're on an airplane. So.
Oh yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, very good points. Does anyone have any closing statements or just anything that you want to make sure that people remember when they are considering or maybe are mid-planning an event, as I know so many people watching this actually are right now?
I don't know. I mean, it's a lot of work. And so if you're going to put in all that work, do something good with it. You know, I mean, it's like, you know, you can put in a ton of work and not affect a lot of people's lives, and you put in a ton of work and really affect people's lives. So it makes sense to, you know, put a little bit more thought kind of at the beginning before you start doing all the work, and, you know, start choosing, you know, a path that, you know, is, you know, constructive. It's not that much different when it comes down to the actual amount of effort you need to put in, but it can make a huge difference in terms of everything from attendance to impact to everything else too. So it's a great opportunity, actually.
I also say surround yourself with a good team. The team that I've been working with, my 2 business partners, we've been doing this for 13 years together now, some of us. It's been a long time, and we've put in several events. Even if they're not events our company is producing, we still bring each other into those events. So I think making sure you have those good, reliable team members and good, reliable volunteers, and just know that ahead of time and making sure you're communicating with them. But we've said a lot of other things you can do, but I think surrounding yourself with a really good team is something to keep in mind as well.
And I'll just end by saying that I think really honest and productive communication is also really key, you know, and that goes with your team as well as to attendees. You know, you don't want people to say, where is this event at? Or, you know, I saw something for an event that I was interested in. And I was like, wait, here's the social media, thing. And I don't know what day it's on. Right. So like, also you're often going just like a million miles a minute. And so it's like, you just want to be able to take a pause every so often and say, okay, are we communicating well? Do we have that plan there?
Absolutely fabulous insight. I appreciate all of you taking the time to share all of these thoughts. They were, like I said, so important. And I think it's really essential information as well for anyone that's considering it, or maybe is looking at their small scale, or even looking back on some of their large scale and wondering, what could we do better, or why isn't this working, or why is this working? So I'm sure everyone watching this today and in the future will be very, very appreciative, as I am. So that is our time. But again, really appreciate all of you, and cheers.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. And thanks to Craft Beer Professionals.